Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 15 of Days Gone By, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of classic cars. Generally performance cars, but some of them perhaps not so much. And in this particular episode we are going back to a slightly older Gran Turismo game, again as we did before with the Jensen Interceptor, to Gran Turismo 5. To feature another car which was featured on GT4 and GT5, but for some reason, probably licensing, has not been featured on GT6. And like the Jensen Interceptor, it's a shame. I mean, it's kind of a shame when any car isn't included anymore, but there are certain cars which really did bring something different to the table, and when those cars aren't included anymore, it's a shame to see them go. And this car is the Ginetta G4. And this car is a very interesting little package. It looks like a small, lightweight sports car, which is exactly what it is, but it's actually a lot lighter than you'd probably think. Most small sports cars tend to hover around the 500 to 700 kilo region, with the majority of them being 600 to 700 kilos or so. This car is a lot lighter than that. In fact, it's not far off the weight of the Caterham. This car only weighs 416 kilos with the full weight loss package, which is really the definition of ultra light. Now, as far as its engine and power, it's powered by a 1.5 litre front mounted engine, it's rear wheel drive, and you can turbocharge that pretty small engine up to a pretty respectable 273 horsepower. Now that doesn't sound necessarily like a huge amount. That's a similar amount of power to the Caterham and some other vehicles on the game in the classic or sports car category, but overall, is that really that much? Is that really going to give you amazing performance? Well, in a 700 or 800 kilo car, that would be enough to make it have pretty good performance, say Lotus or Vauxhall VX220 level performance. You put that in a 416 kilo car and it's going to go like a rocket. Quite literally. Now, as far as torque, it puts out 220 foot-pounds, which although isn't a huge amount for a bigger car, that much torque in something so lightweight is pretty hefty. Now, the horsepower per tonne on this vehicle is very high due to just how low that weight is. 656 horsepower per tonne is very impressive. Now, as far as the PP, it's really high on this car, 597. Now, on GT6, if it were on that game, the PP may well be different, but as it is on GT5, that is extremely high. So the question is that justified? Because the Caterham, the Red Bull Junior and various others also have very, very high PP levels, but some of them, such as the light car company Rocket, are justified in being that high, because it actually is that good. Others, such as the Red Bull Junior, just can't compete at the level that their PP is set at. They're just not quick enough, usually in a straight line. So, is the Ginetta? Well, actually, perhaps surprisingly, yes, it is competitive at that level. Now, in a straight line, it's not the fastest of small sports cars, but it's certainly not slow. The acceleration is incredibly rapid, and at the end of the day, the main thing about these cars is the track potential, the cornering speeds, the handling, etc. So how does it perform in that regard? Well, it's kind of controversial. Some people consider the Ginetta to have bad handling. They find it difficult, they find it challenging, which is understandable. You've got a fair amount of power in something that's ultra compact. In fact, it's one of the smallest sports cars you can buy, and it is extremely lightweight. So you have very little weight to ground all that power. But I would say it's actually a very good handling car. I personally have no problems driving this car at all with very minimal tuning, and I don't really understand, to be honest, why people think it's so difficult to drive. I just don't find it that way. I personally find the Caterham, in its natural, unfettered form, to be far more twitchy than this car, and I just love driving this thing. I don't necessarily use it all the time on GT5, but it's the kind of car which is good just to bring out for a bit of fun. and it's also a car which people don't expect you to use. Now, of course, online that's irrelevant now on Gran Turismo 5 because the servers are shut down, but it's still a cool car to have just for the fun of it, in a similar way to the Jensen Interceptor. Now, compound on top of that the car is not overly expensive. I can't recall the exact price because you can only get the car in the used dealership, but I recall that it wasn't overly priced. It was something like 65 grand, which isn't that bad for a classic sports car. So overall, if you are of course on GT5, I would recommend looking out for this car in the used dealership, because although it's not necessarily the kind of car that you'll use all the time, in career mode there are definitely races where it does come in handy. And even if for nothing else, it's an extremely fun car to drive. Now, as we said at the start of the video, it is a shame that it's not on Gran Turismo anymore, and the chances of it coming back, say in GT Sport, I would say are very slim. But perhaps we might see Ginetta return to Gran Turismo in the future at some point. Whether or not this car specifically will, seems unlikely, to be honest, but at least we do have it on GT4 and GT5 to still enjoy. So that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.